All right, kiddos, let's get into section 10.2 in your note-taking guide. And we're going to talk about political socialization. Again, I'm going to go pretty quickly. So if you miss something, just press pause to write things down. So the first thing we want to make sure we understand is just how it is that we become socialized politically. And when I'm talking about political socialization, I'm referring to all the experiences that we have and all the various factors that shape individuals' political values, attitudes, and behaviors. So what you think is the most important, if you trust or don't trust the government, if you think the government should be involved in economic matters or should not, and then do you participate, do you not, all of your political behaviors. Of course, our political socialization contributes to our political ideology. And this is something you're really going to delve more into on Monday when I am not there. Political ideology is talking about an individual's coherent set of beliefs about the government and politics. So the government should tell people what they should or should not do, or the government should not. Individual decisions are left up to individuals, or the government is there to help impose morality. All of that contributes to a person's political ideology. The various agents of political, let's try that again. There's three major agents of political socialization: family, schools, and your peers. And if I were you, I would star family and then write on your guide, it is the most important factor. There's extremely strong links between the people you grow up with, their political ideology, their party identification, and then your own, as they are your best source of political information at the time. I mean, just stop and think about it. Think about the conversations that are held at the dinner table. Think about what channel the television is on. Think of the newspaper, if you know anybody actually reads old school print newspapers still, or what they subscribe to on their phones. The political information that your parents have, that's what you hear, right? I mean, I know my kids hear things that I say and hear things that Sean says, and that's registering in their minds, whether they are aware of it or not. Children tend to mimic behavior of the adults that they're around until they're old enough to rebel. But at that point, political values are strongly seated, and it might be hard to get away from that, right? Yeah. So really quickly, let's just go to this slide. Look at all these political families. I mean, it shouldn't surprise you that some members of the Trump family are probably going to seek office if Donald Trump does not win this next election, or even if he does. Then you've got the Kennedys to the right of them. Above the Kennedys, you've got the Adamses. And then, of course, you've got the Bush family. Also, how about the Cheneys? Dick Cheney, that was George W. Bush's vice president, his daughter, Liz Cheney. Perhaps you guys have heard a lot about her and standing up to President Trump, and actually, the House of Democrats seeking her out, saying, hey, be the voice of reason in their minds. I'm sorry, guys, interruption. Willow, that is Herbert Hoover.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, guys, Willow is playing with their president's placemat. Yes, you heard me correctly. That's a thing. Okay, going back to other agents of political socialization, education, that's huge, right? So education helps transmit norms. Like, what is the norm for people to do when it comes to political participation or political values or political ideologies? Think of all the things that you learned to do in elementary school, where you were taught to be a good citizen. Of course, we teach American government. Got a smiley face on there. You think you know why. And we try to introduce you guys to political participation and volunteering, ways that you can get involved if you wish to be more participatory than the average person. I think it's pretty clear how your peers influence your political socialization. Just think of all the conversation that you have with your friends about this class, about things you hear on the news, about stuff that you see on social media. Think of how the government and politics is deep rooted in those conversations. It just is. It just is. Other agents of political socialization include civic and religious organizations. It shouldn't surprise you that people who are religious, their religion can play a very large role in their party ideology, their political ideology, and their party identification. Here's an example. So Catholics and Jewish people tend to be more liberal than Protestants do. Interestingly enough, though, in 2016, white Catholics voted for Trump, but Hispanic Catholics voted for Clinton. And I do think it's important to look at that distinction, because that lets you know that you cannot gauge how a person is going to vote by one factor. You cannot say they're a woman, they're a Democrat. It's not that easy. There's so many more nuances to understanding political socialization and political ideology. So, think of the other factors for those Hispanic Catholics that could have contributed towards a more liberal vote, such as socioeconomic status, such as being a member of a minority, so on and so forth. Among the most conservative are evangelicals. So, Pentecostal religions, super duper to the right in terms of social matters, anti-gay marriage, pro-life, and then, just taking it a little bit more extreme in those conservative values, right? Muslims, looking at another group, strongly favor Democrats. And again, think about the historical context there. Think back to major events for Muslim Americans in this country. Hopefully September 11th jumps to your brain, and how that group of people were treated following that. But guys, religious places, churches, synagogues, mosques, they're all very influential because of the doctrinal positions that are taken by the organization, the sermons that are given, the social interaction among the members. I just think of all the activities that I did growing up in youth group. All of those things really contribute to a person's political socialization. And just pause this to take a look at this chart showing you presidential vote by religious affiliation and race. And I'm sorry that it stops at 2016. Of course, age matters, right? Let's never forget about gray power, folks. Not surprisingly, your political views are going to change over the course of time. They just are. Who knows, maybe you can save this video and in 60 years, you can go back to it and you can say, oh, I was this way then and I'm this way now. Take that, Miss Etter. And that's cool. That is totally cool. But generally speaking, you do tend to get a little bit more conservative as you get older. And there's various reasons for this. The older you are, the more set in your ways you become. The older you are, you're on a fixed income, so on and so forth. But two things of note I think would be interesting to look at here are the generational effect and the life cycle effect. So the generational effect talks about the impact of historical events experienced by a generation and how that affects their political views. If you came to school on senior skip day, we talked about this a little bit. I think of my grandfather who lived through the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, and that definitely affected how he viewed the government and his money and bonds and things of that nature. Some people, if they really struggled during that time, might look to the government to provide more economic assistance. You see what I'm saying? Also, think of things that you guys have experienced as teenagers or middle schoolers, quite a bit of attention placed on school shootings, and quite a number of school shootings, I should say. So that most likely affected your political views, right? Then you've got the life cycle effect. This is talking about the impact of a person's age and what stage in life they're in on their political views. So again, think of people who are nearing retirement on a fixed income. That's going to affect how they think of things politically. And same thing if you're headed into college, you guys aren't as financially independent yet, so that might not factor the same way in for you as it does for parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, so on and so forth. Okay, pause please. Okay, you want to know which president that is? Willow, say hi to everybody.
Hi.
Is that Garfield? No, that's Ulysses S. Grant.
Ulysses S. Grant.
Okay. All righty. So then, and think of how this affects political behavior, sadly. And I know I am preaching to the choir because I know you guys are gonna vote and I love you for it. And it makes me happy, but people your age do not. As a whole, they just don't. They don't see themselves as being affected by political things as much as, say, boomers are. But again, different things shape different generations. Millennials, which I technically am, tended to be shaped more by, terrorism, because that's where we grew up. That was the focus of the government in large part. Whereas boomers tend to be shaped more by Watergate and Vietnam. For your generation, I think the Black Lives Matter movement is going to be a real point that had a chance to influence your political socialization and political ideology. And here's what I was just talking about. So there you go, guys. A couple questions to ponder. Maybe we can discuss these in class next week. Okay. This shows you public trust in the government. And you can see a big dip right around when Nixon resigned from Watergate. And then some pretty rough times for Clinton there around 95. Although the impeachment was not until 1999, just FYI. Notice that huge spike in 2001, guys. That was the rally around the flag following 9/11. And again, this just shows you how things change based on, the life cycle effect. Look at those people who are older compared to people who are younger and look at their views on same-sex marriage. Now, granted, this stops, 4 years ago? But still, I imagine it's probably not much different. So think about this question and try to think about it in the scope of rule of law. Okay, section 10.3, almost done with chapter 10, folks. So in this section, we're looking at globalization and American core values. So go ahead and get the definition of globalization, please. It's the increasing interconnectedness, right, of people, businesses, countries throughout the world. There's just so much more working together on things. I mean, look at what's happening in Glasgow right now, the climate change summit. What's happened with globalization is that we're really kind of blurring the line between what is considered international politics and what is considered domestic politics. I'm going to pause for a second, let you write that down. Yes, Willow. That's Rutherford B. Hayes.
No, wait, where was?
Rutherford B. Hayes.
No, this guy.
Sorry, guys.
Right near the circle. On the back.
And I'm back. So, interestingly enough, guys, we are no longer the only superpower. Spoiler alert, China has this massive global economic power. They're really building up their military strength. Russia is another example of asserting its own interests in Europe, also in the US. Can you guys think of how Russia has tried to do that involving the United States? Hopefully some people are thinking about influencing elections and influencing voting. Right. So one way to look at this is to look at the growing number of organizations that are out there with global impact. So a few examples, you've got multinational corporations, and these are corporations that make, transport, market goods and services in 2 or more countries. And, again, pause me if I'm going too quick, but just think of these unbelievably large companies in the United States, Coca-Cola, Nike, just to name a couple. And how they're not just in the United States of America. They have production facilities all over the world, mostly in Latin America. Non-governmental organizations or NGOs. These are independent groups that operate outside of the government, but they work towards a public cause, right? So again, American organizations, not within our government, but all over the world, like Doctors Without Borders is a great example. Here you have an image of one of the many Americans who does work with this fabulous organization. Then you've got intergovernmental organizations known as IGOs, and they're out there to kind of challenge the sovereignty of countries, which is why countries are not always gung-ho to get on board. So just think of the European Union, the WTO, World Trade Organization, the United Nations. If you join the United Nations, you have to say you're not going to do every single thing you want to do all the time if it's not in the best interest of, the world. You do have to give up a little bit of that independence in order to be a part of this organization. The WHO been very, very active lately. All righty, and then let's look at free trade and how that has also, allowed for this globalized economy that we find ourselves in. So there's not as many restrictions on the flow of goods and services across national borders as there used to be. I imagine you guys studied NAFTA last year, the North American Free Trade Agreement. That was a Clinton thing. Well, President Trump replaced it with the USMCA, the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. And what this tries to do is create a more balanced reciprocal trade that supports more high-paying jobs for Americans and grows the North American economy. So in hopes to get at what was the negative aspects of NAFTA, according to President President Trump, he said that it was an agreement that only really benefited Mexico and Canada, not the United States of America. Part of the goal, according to President Trump, and it has been ratified, guys, is to modernize NAFTA into more of a 21st century trade agreement, recognizing things have changed since 1993. Like I mentioned, making it rebalancing the trade to support more manufacturing and strengthening the North American portion of it, specifically the United States, trade in agriculture, and supporting more American small and medium-sized businesses. That was the goal by President Trump. Another example of this free trade is the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was endorsed by President Obama. President Trump let that go. We'll see if Biden turns back to it, but it's a more regional trade agreement between 12 nations. Really, what we've seen that's changed from this is that service jobs have increased. There are more of them, which does result in lower prices for consumers. So, those are definitely some benefits of a globalized economy. Guys, I have paused this video like 10 additional times. She keeps asking me who these presidents are. It's kind of fun. What about globalization and democracy? Obviously, if we're out there trading, meeting people, working together in these world summits, globalization can encourage democratization, right? And to be in some of these international organizations, like we talked about a moment ago, the IGOs, states do have to reach a certain level of democracy to be accepted in membership for these organizations. So, I mean, North Korea is not going to do that. China and Russia are going to say they're doing that. you know, is it really happened? That's up to your imagination. But a lot of watchdog non-governmental organizations are there to hold these authoritarian regimes accountable to an international audience. That's why you'll see groups publish things on their social media that some of these regimes don't want to get out, and then of course try to immediately shut down. But now that citizens have access to technology, especially social media, they can, you know, post these videos. I mean, guys, remember everything that Hong Kong was doing not that long ago? And to say, look at the atrocities, look at what we're dealing with. Here's a call to the free people of the world to unite behind us and encourage us to fight the good fight to get away from these terrible situations that we're in. All right, so we've talked a lot about some positives. Now let's talk about the dark side of globalization, because it certainly does exist. And so we really, that's Benjamin Harrison, honey. Benjamin Harrison. We really see this in outsourcing, right? Where a company takes its business out of the United States of America to go to a place where labor costs are cheaper, production is more efficient, because the workers are working crazy long hours. They're working crazy long hours. They're getting paid nothing. And there's, you know, so many labor violations. But here's the thing, there's labor violations that we would identify as such, but in the country where it's taking place, they don't have those same requirements. So, you know, all sorts of pollution can go into the air because the government, it's not that they don't care, it's just that they don't regulate that the same way the United States does. Maybe children can go to work in factories at younger ages than they can in the United States. Do you guys see what I'm saying? And what this does is outsourcing does result in a loss of jobs domestically. This is something that President Trump really harped on. It can lower environmental and labor standards in foreign countries because it's so enticing to have Nike open up a production facility there, that in order to lure Nike, sorry, I'm just using Nike as an example here, but it's kind of a valid one. They say, look at all that you can do here that you can't do in the United States. Come, operate your business here. Give us the opportunity to have these jobs for our people, etc. And because there's more American companies in the world, it kind of weakens traditional cultures, right? I mean, I know I can speak to this. When I went to Prague, when I was all of, 20, it was towards the end of our European trip. And we were just so done with kind of, I don't know, foreign foods and such, that we went to a McDonald's in Prague. Ugh. But all of these big mass produced things can make local traditional art and food and things of that nature so expensive they just can't compete. So that can weaken these traditional cultures because there's so much American stuff coming in. And it does kind of connect people and groups with, some bad intentions. So that's not the best. There's a lovely political cartoon for you. So I want you to think about this question. Think about the other question. Look at this picture. And that's all, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Willow, say bye.
Bye.
Show them your placemat. Yeah, learning all the time, y'all. Okay, stop.